Picture this: a dusty Texas road in 1886, where the scorching sun beats down mercilessly on cracked earth. The only sounds are the distant whistle of wind through sagebrush and the rhythmic clip-clop of a horse's hooves. But today, there's something else: the desperate panting of a child running as if his very life depends on it. What drives a 12-year-old boy to flee with such terror? What secrets lie hidden in his torn clothes and bare, bleeding feet? And what happens when the man sworn to uphold the law chooses compassion over duty? This is a story that will challenge everything you think you know about justice, family, and the power of a single human gesture. It's about Sheriff Daniel Rourke, a man haunted by his own past, and a nameless boy whose whispered plea would change both their lives forever. Get ready for a journey through the harsh beauty of frontier Texas, where sometimes the greatest act of rebellion is simply choosing to love what the world has thrown away. Before we dive in, if you're drawn to stories of quiet heroes and life-changing choices, hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. This isn't just a tale, it's a journey you won't forget. The Texas sun was merciless that September afternoon in 1886, beating down on Millbrook's dusty Main Street. Sheriff Daniel Rourke guided his mare through town, nodding to Mrs. Henderson sweeping her porch. At 42, Daniel had the weathered face of a man who'd seen hardship. Deep lines around his gray eyes spoke of sleepless nights and difficult decisions. The tranquility was shattered by approaching hoofbeats. 3 riders emerged from the heat shimmer, their horses lathered with sweat. Daniel recognized the lead rider, Marcus Fleming, owner of the largest ranch in the county. "Sheriff Rourke," Fleming called out, pulling his horse to a stop in a cloud of dust. "We need your help. My boy's run off again, and this time he's gone too far." Daniel studied the man carefully. Fleming was successful, but there were whispers, quiet conversations that stopped when he entered a room. "How long has he been gone, Marcus?" "Since yesterday evening. Found his window open this morning." Fleming's voice carried an edge that made Daniel's instincts prickle. "The boy's troubled, Sheriff. Needs a firm hand." "What's his name?" Daniel asked, though he'd never heard Fleming speak of having a son. "Tommy. Tommy Fleming. He's my nephew. Been living with us since his parents died. Ungrateful little wretch, doesn't appreciate what we've done for him." The 2 men with Fleming shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. Daniel recognized them as ranch hands, their faces carefully neutral in the way of men who'd learned not to ask questions. "I'll keep an eye out," Daniel said carefully. "If I find him, I'll bring him home safe." "You do that," Fleming replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. "And Sheriff, don't let his stories fool you. Boy's got quite an imagination. Makes up all sorts of tales to get attention." As the riders disappeared, Daniel felt something was wrong. He continued patrol, eyes scanning the landscape. Near sunset, he heard soft whimpering from behind Jensen's abandoned wagon. Behind the weathered wagon was a boy, maybe 12, his dark hair matted with dust. His torn clothes hung loose on his thin frame. His feet were bare and bloody, with deep cuts that spoke of desperate flight. Daniel crouched down slowly. Up close, he could see bruises on the boy's arms in various stages of healing, a fading mark on his cheek, and the way he instinctively flinched. "I'm Sheriff Rourke," Daniel said softly. "What's your name, son?" The boy's eyes darted frantically. "Tommy," he said finally. "But please, sir, I ain't done nothing wrong. I can't go back there." Daniel's mind raced. This had to be Fleming's nephew, but seeing the boy's condition, everything Fleming had said took on a different meaning. The firm hand and ungrateful behavior suddenly seemed like justifications for something much darker. "Tommy," Daniel said gently, "can you tell me where you've been living?" "With Uncle Marcus," Tommy replied, then quickly added, "But I ain't been bad, sir. I do my chores, I don't talk back. Sometimes I make mistakes, and he gets real angry." The boy's voice broke on the last words, and Daniel felt something fundamental shift inside him. In that moment, he made a decision that would change everything. Instead of reaching for his handcuffs or standing to march the boy to his horse, Daniel did something entirely different. He extended his hand, not with authority, but with gentleness. "Tommy," he said quietly, "I'm not going to take you back. Not tonight. You're safe now." The boy stared at the outstretched hand as if it were a mirage, something too good to be real. Tears began to roll down his dust-streaked cheeks. But you're the sheriff. Uncle Marcus said you'd have to bring me back. He said it was the law." "Sometimes," Daniel said, his voice steady and sure. "There are laws written in books, and then there are laws written in our hearts. Right now, my heart is telling me that you need help more than you need to be taken anywhere." Slowly, tentatively, Tommy reached out and placed his small, dirt-stained hand in Daniel's larger, calloused one. The moment their hands touched, something passed between them, an understanding, a promise, a bond that neither fully comprehended but both desperately needed. If this moment moved you, stick around. The road ahead holds even greater challenges and some powerful surprises. Don't miss what's coming next. Daniel helped Tommy to his feet, noting how the boy favored his left ankle. "Can you walk?" "Yes, sir," Tommy said, though he winced with each step. "We're going to my house," Daniel said, leading him toward Molly. "We'll get you cleaned up, get some food in you, and figure out what comes next." As Daniel helped Tommy onto his horse, the boy looked back toward the direction of the Fleming ranch with terror still evident in his eyes. "He's going to come looking for me," Tommy whispered. "He always does." "Let him come," Daniel replied, swinging up behind the boy. "You're under my protection now." As they rode toward Daniel's modest house on the outskirts of town, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were Molly's steady hoofbeats and the evening call of a meadowlark. But in the silence between them, something profound was taking root, the fragile beginning of trust, and perhaps, if they were very lucky, something that might one day grow into love. The sun had set completely by the time they reached Daniel's small wooden house, its windows glowing warm and yellow in the gathering darkness. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Tommy felt something he'd almost forgotten existed: hope. Daniel's house was modest but clean, a stone fireplace, built-in bookshelves, and simple furniture. "Sit here," Daniel said gently, guiding Tommy to a chair. "Let me look at those feet." Tommy tensed automatically, but Daniel's touch was careful as he examined the cuts. "These need cleaning," Daniel said, moving to his medical supplies. "It's going to sting some." As Daniel worked, Tommy studied the man's face. "You've done this before." Daniel paused. "Had some experience during the war. And I had a younger brother once. Always getting scraped up." "Had?" Tommy asked. "He died when he was about your age. Fever took him." Daniel's voice carried old grief. "I always wondered what kind of man he might have become." Daniel finished bandaging Tommy's feet and prepared food: beans, cornbread, and bacon. The smell filled the house, and Tommy's stomach growled audibly. "When's the last time you ate?" Daniel asked. Tommy thought about it. "Yesterday morning, I think." Daniel nodded grimly. "Tell me about your life with Marcus Fleming," he said as he cooked. Tommy's hands clenched. "I don't like to talk about it, sir." "You don't have to tell me everything, but I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Daniel set food before Tommy, noting his wide eyes at the generous portions. "What kind of rules?" "Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't leave without permission. Do chores exactly right. Don't tell anyone about family business." Tommy ate slowly, as if he didn't trust it to stay. "Sometimes I forget, and he gets angry." "How angry?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "How long have you been living with him?" 2 years. Since Mama and Papa died in the cholera outbreak." "What made you run away this time?" Tommy's hand stilled. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with tears. "There's a new hand. Jake Morrison. He's mean. Yesterday, Uncle Marcus said I was getting too old for just whippings. Said Jake had ideas about teaching boys real discipline." Tommy shuddered. "I got scared and climbed out my window." Daniel placed his hand over Tommy's smaller one. "What you've told me, that's not discipline. That's wrong, and it's against the law." For the first time since Daniel found him, Tommy began to truly cry. Deep, wrenching sobs. Daniel moved around the table and pulled him into a gentle embrace. "You're safe now. I promise you you're safe." As Tommy cried against his shoulder, Daniel made silent vows. He would protect this boy, no matter the cost. Outside, the Texas night was full of sounds, but inside, there was only the quiet sound of healing beginning. Daniel woke before dawn. He could hear Tommy's quiet breathing from a small bedroom. Moving quietly, he started coffee, his mind working through the challenges ahead. Approaching hoofbeats interrupted his thoughts. Through the window, he saw 3 riders in the gray pre-dawn light. Fleming, flanked by his ranch hands, Jake Morrison among them. Daniel stepped onto his porch. "Morning, Marcus. You're up early." Fleming dismounted. "Sheriff, I believe you have my nephew. I'm here to collect him." "The boy came to me for help," Daniel said simply. "He's a runaway child who belongs with his family." Fleming snapped. "I have every legal right to take him home." "Legal right, maybe, but I'm not sure you have the moral right." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Jake Morrison shifted in his saddle, his hand moving toward his gun, but Daniel's cold stare stopped him. "What are you implying, Sheriff?" Fleming's voice was dangerously quiet. "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. That boy is covered in bruises, Marcus. His feet are torn to pieces from running. He's terrified to go back with you. A man would have to ask himself why. The boy is troubled, disobedient. Sometimes discipline is necessary." "And what about Jake here?" Daniel nodded toward Morrison. What kind of discipline was he planning to provide? Morrison spoke for the first time, his voice rough and aggressive. "I don't know what lies the boy's been telling, but—" "Nobody's talking to you." Daniel cut him off sharply. His attention returned to Fleming. "Here's what's going to happen, Marcus. The boy stays with me for now. You have no authority. I have every authority. I'm investigating reports of child abuse. Until that investigation is complete, Tommy remains in protective custody." Fleming's face flushed red with anger. "This is ridiculous. I'll go to Judge Harrison. I'll have your badge for this." "You do that," Daniel said calmly. "But until you get a court order saying otherwise, the boy stays put." Behind him, Daniel heard the soft sound of the front door opening. Tommy appeared in the doorway, still wearing the clean clothes Daniel had found for him, but his face pale with fear. "Uncle Marcus," Tommy said quietly, his voice trembling. Fleming's expression softened artificially. "Tommy, boy, you've caused us quite a scare. Come on now, time to come home." Tommy shrank back against the doorframe. I don't want to go back, sir." "Nonsense. You're just confused. Sheriff Rourke has been filling your head with foolish ideas." Daniel stepped slightly to the side, positioning himself between Tommy and the mounted men. The boy has made his choice clear. He's 12 years old. Fleming exploded. "He doesn't get to make choices. I'm his legal guardian." "And I'm the sheriff," Daniel replied evenly. "My job is to protect the people of this county, especially those who can't protect themselves." Jake Morrison finally spoke up again. "This is horseshit, Marcus. We should just take the boy." Daniel's hand moved to his gun in a smooth, practiced motion. "I wouldn't recommend that course of action." The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. For a moment, it seemed violence was inevitable. Then Fleming held up a hand, stopping Morrison from whatever foolish move he'd been contemplating. "This isn't over, Rourke," Fleming said, his voice thick with menace. "I'll be back with papers. Legal papers. And when I am, you'll hand over my nephew, or I'll see you stripped of that badge and run out of this county." "I'll be here," Daniel replied simply. As the 3 men rode away, Tommy sagged against the doorframe with relief. Daniel turned to check on him, noting the boy's pale complexion and shaking hands. "Are you all right?" Daniel asked. "He's really angry," Tommy whispered. "I've never seen him that angry before." "He'll get over it. The question is, are you sure about this? Because once we start down this path, there's no going back. Fleming will use every bit of influence he has to get you returned to him." Tommy looked up at Daniel with eyes that seemed far too old for his face. "Will you really keep me safe, even if it costs you your job?" Daniel knelt down, so he was at eye level with the boy. "Tommy, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to remember it always. Sometimes in life, we're faced with choices that define who we really are, what we stand for, what we believe in. This is one of those moments for me. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I became a sheriff to protect people, to serve justice. If I hand you back to a man who hurts you, just because he has a piece of paper saying he can, then I'm not really serving justice at all, am I? Tommy stared at him for a long moment. You'd really give up being sheriff for me? In a heartbeat, Daniel said without hesitation. There are more important things than badges and titles, son. Sometimes the most important thing is just doing what's right. The word son slipped out naturally, surprising them both. But instead of awkwardness, it felt right, like a piece of a puzzle falling into place. What happens now? Tommy asked. Now we go into town. I need to talk to Judge Harrison before Fleming does. And we need to start documenting everything. Your injuries, your testimony, anything that proves what's been happening to you. Will people believe me? Uncle Marcus says I'm a liar. I believe you, Daniel said firmly. And I think others will too, once they hear the truth. As they prepared to head into town, Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at the edge of a precipice. The next few hours would determine not just Tommy's future, but the course of both their lives. He'd made his choice, and there would be consequences. But looking at the boy, this brave, broken child who'd found the courage to ask for help, Daniel knew he'd make the same choice again. Some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth protecting, no matter the cost. And sometimes, the most rebellious thing a man could do was simply choose love over law, compassion over convenience, and doing what's right over doing what's easy. Judge Harrison's chambers smelled of leather, tobacco, and old books. The elderly jurist sat behind his massive oak desk, his weathered hands folded as he listened to Daniel's account. At 68, Harrison had seen every kind of case the frontier could produce, but the furrows in his brow deepened as Daniel spoke. These are serious allegations, Sheriff, the judge said finally. Marcus Fleming is a respected member of this community. Accusing him of child abuse, well, that's not something to be done lightly. I'm not doing it lightly, Your Honor, Daniel replied. I'm doing it based on evidence. Tommy sat in a chair beside Daniel, his small frame dwarfed by the formal setting. He'd been quiet since entering the courthouse, overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. And you, son, Judge Harrison addressed Tommy directly, his voice gentler than it had been with Daniel. Do you understand what's happening here? What these accusations could mean? Yes, sir, Tommy said quietly. Sheriff Rourke explained it to me. And you're certain about what you've told the sheriff? About how your uncle treated you? Tommy nodded, then seemed to remember the judge couldn't see the gesture clearly. Yes, sir. I wouldn't lie about something like that. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. I've known Marcus Fleming for 15 years. He's never given me reason to doubt his character. Daniel felt his heart sink, but before he could respond, the judge continued. However, Harrison said, his tone sharpening, I've also known you for 8 years, Sheriff Rourke. You're not a man given to flights of fancy or false accusations. If you say this boy has been mistreated, I'm inclined to believe you've seen evidence of it. Hope flickered in Daniel's chest. Furthermore, the judge continued, I've heard whispers about that new hand of Fleming's. Jake Morrison. Man has a reputation for cruelty, and not just to animals. I was wondering why Marcus would hire someone like that. The sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor interrupted them. Moments later, the chamber door burst open, and Marcus Fleming strode in, his face flushed with anger. Behind him came Jake Morrison and another man Daniel didn't recognize, someone in an expensive suit who had the look of a lawyer. Judge Harrison, Fleming began without preamble, I demand the immediate return of my nephew. Sheriff Rourke has overstepped his authority and kidnapped a child under my legal guardianship. The lawyer stepped forward. Your Honor, I'm Robert Chandler, representing Mr. Fleming. My client has full legal custody of the boy, and the sheriff has no right to interfere with that relationship. Judge Harrison's expression darkened at the intrusion. Gentlemen, this is my chambers, not a saloon. You'll wait to be invited to speak, or you'll wait outside. Fleming's jaw worked, but he forced himself to remain silent. The lawyer, more experienced in courtroom protocol, nodded apologetically. "Now then," the judge continued, "Mr. Chandler, you're correct that Mr. Fleming has legal guardianship. However, Sheriff Rourke is investigating allegations of abuse. Under territorial law, he has the authority to remove a child from danger pending a full investigation." "What allegations?" Chandler demanded. "What evidence?" Judge Harrison gestured to Tommy. "Why don't you examine the boy yourself, counselor? Look at his feet, his arms, his ribs. Ask him how he got those injuries." For the first time, the lawyer's confidence seemed to waver. He looked at Tommy more carefully, taking in the bandaged feet, the fading bruises visible on his arms. "Boys get injured," Fleming said quickly. "It's the nature of ranch life. Tommy's clumsy, always getting himself hurt." "Is that so?" Judge Harrison asked Tommy directly. "Are you clumsy, son?" Tommy looked between his uncle and the judge, fear warring with determination in his young face. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying clearly in the silent room. "I got the bruises from Uncle Marcus's belt," he said, "and his fists, when the belt wasn't enough. The cuts on my feet are from running away over the rocks, because I was afraid of what Jake was going to do to me." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Morrison, who'd been smirking since he entered, looked uncomfortable. "That's a lie," Fleming said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The boy's disturbed. He makes up stories." "If he's making up stories," Daniel said quietly, "then how do I examine his injuries? How do I know exactly where to find bruises shaped like belt buckles? How do I know about the pattern of scars on his back from previous beatings?" Judge Harrison stood up slowly, his decision clear in his bearing. "Mr. Chandler, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order. Mr. Fleming is not to approach the boy until a full investigation can be conducted. Sheriff Rourke, you'll retain custody pending that investigation." "This is outrageous," Fleming exploded. "I have rights. That boy belongs to me." "That boy," Judge Harrison said with steel in his voice, "belongs to no one. He's a human being, not property. And as long as I'm on this bench, no child will be returned to a situation where they're being harmed." The judge's gaze fell on Morrison, who'd been unusually quiet throughout the proceedings. "And you, Mr. Morrison, I'll be asking the territorial authorities to look into your background. Something tells me they'll find your employment history interesting." Morrison's face went pale, and he took a step toward the door. "Going somewhere?" Daniel asked mildly, his hand resting on his gun belt. "I got work to do," Morrison muttered. "I'm sure you do," the judge replied. "But it won't be on the Fleming ranch. Consider your employment there terminated." As the three men filed out, Fleming shot one last venomous look at Tommy. "This isn't over, boy. I'll get you back, and when I do—" "Mr. Fleming," Judge Harrison's voice cut like a whip, "if I hear of you threatening this child, I'll have you arrested for intimidation. Are we clear?" Fleming left without another word, but the threat in his eyes was unmistakable. After they were gone, Judge Harrison sat back down, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "Son," he said to Tommy, "what you did today took courage. Speaking up against someone who's hurt you, especially when that someone has power over you, that's not easy." "Sheriff Rourke said I should tell the truth," Tommy replied. "He said the truth was important." "The sheriff's right," the judge agreed. "Now, we need to figure out what comes next. The restraining order will protect you for now, but we need a permanent solution." Daniel cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I'd like to petition for custody. Temporary at first, but permanent if Tommy agrees." Both the judge and Tommy stared at him in surprise. "You want to adopt me?" Tommy asked, his voice filled with wonder. "If you'll have me," Daniel said simply. "I know I'm not much, just a sheriff in a small town, but I can promise you this. You'll never be hurt again. You'll be fed, clothed, educated, and most importantly, you'll be loved." Tommy's eyes filled with tears, but for the first time since Daniel had found him, they were tears of joy rather than fear. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, sir. I'd like that very much." Judge Harrison smiled, the first genuine smile Daniel had seen from him all day. "Well then, that settles it. I'll start the paperwork for a formal adoption. In the meantime, Sheriff, you have my full authority to act as the boy's guardian." 6 months later, the spring of 1887 brought new life to Millbrook. The harsh winter had passed, and the cottonwood trees were budding with fresh green leaves. In the small cemetery behind the white-painted church, wildflowers grew among the older graves, adding splashes of color to the peaceful setting. Daniel and Tommy stood before a simple wooden cross, freshly painted and bearing the name, William Rourke, beloved brother. In Tommy's hands was a small bouquet of prairie flowers he'd picked that morning. "I wish I could have met him," Tommy said quietly, placing the flowers at the base of the cross. "He would have liked you," Daniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "He always wanted a nephew to teach things to, fishing, riding, maybe even some of that book learning you're so good at." Tommy had indeed proven to be bright, quickly making up for the education he'd missed while living with the Flemings. Mrs. Patterson, the town's retired schoolteacher, had taken him under her wing, amazed at his quick mind and eagerness to learn. "Do you think he knows?" Tommy asked. "About us, I mean. About how we found each other." Daniel considered the question seriously. "I think he does, and I think he's glad that we found each other when we needed it most." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. The events of the past 6 months had changed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. The adoption had been finalized just 2 weeks earlier, making their bond legal as well as emotional. Marcus Fleming had left the county shortly after the court proceedings, selling his ranch and disappearing overnight. Jake Morrison had been arrested on outstanding warrants in 2 other territories, charges that painted a picture of a man who'd made a career of cruelty. The territorial authorities were still investigating other cases where he might have been involved. "Pa," Tommy said, the word still new enough to bring a smile to Daniel's face. "Yes, son. Thank you for choosing me, for not taking me back that day." Daniel put his arm around Tommy's shoulders, marveling at how the boy had grown and filled out with proper food and care. The fearful, skeletal child he'd found behind the wagon had become a healthy, confident young man. "Tommy," Daniel said, "I need you to understand something. I didn't choose you out of pity or duty. I chose you because from the moment I met you, I saw something special. Courage, integrity, a good heart despite everything you'd been through. You didn't need me to save you. You saved yourself by having the strength to ask for help. But you're the one who extended your hand," Tommy pointed out. "And you're the one who took it," Daniel replied. "That took more courage than anything I did." As they walked back toward town, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the prairie, Tommy asked, "Do you ever regret it, giving up your old life for me?" Daniel stopped walking and turned to face his son, for that's what Tommy truly was now, in every way that mattered. "Tommy," he said seriously, "my old life was just existing, going through the motions, keeping the peace, but never really living. You didn't take anything away from me. You gave me everything. You gave me purpose, joy, a reason to come home at night. You gave me a family." Tommy smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. "I love you too, Pa." The words hung in the warm spring air, simple but profound. They represented everything that had changed, everything that had been healed, everything that had been built from the ashes of pain and fear. As they continued their walk home, the setting sun painted the Texas sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. In the distance, they could see the warm glow of lights beginning to flicker on in the windows of Millbrook, a community that had witnessed their journey and had come to embrace them both. Mrs. Patterson waved from her porch as they passed, calling out, "Tommy, don't forget about your arithmetic homework." "Yes, ma'am," Tommy called back, grinning at Daniel. "She's worse than any sheriff when it comes to making sure I follow the rules." "Good rules, though," Daniel observed. "Rules meant to help you grow, not hurt you." "I know the difference now," Tommy said quietly. "I know what it feels like to be cared for instead of controlled." They reached their house just as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The same modest building where Tommy had first found sanctuary now bore the marks of a true home. A child's drawings on the walls, books scattered on the table from homework sessions, a fishing pole leaning against the porch rail. "Pa," Tommy said as Daniel lit the oil lamp in the main room. "What is it, son?" "When I was little, before my real parents died, my mama used to say that sometimes angels don't have wings. She said they just look like regular people who choose to do good when they don't have to." Daniel felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Your mama sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was," Tommy agreed. "And she was right about the angels." Later that evening, as Tommy worked on his arithmetic at the kitchen table and Daniel read through some territorial law books, researching better protection laws for children, a cause that had become important to him, a comfortable domesticity settled over the house. It was in moments like these that Daniel marveled at how completely his life had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a lonely man going through the motions of life, respected but isolated, competent but unfulfilled. Now he was a father, planning not just for tomorrow but for years ahead. Tommy's education, his future, the man he would become. "Pa, I'm stuck on this problem," Tommy said, looking up from his slate. Daniel set aside his reading and moved to look over Tommy's shoulder. "Let's see what we've got here." As he helped Tommy work through the mathematics, Daniel realized that this simple moment of a father helping his son with homework was worth more than all the respect his badge had ever brought him. This was real. This was what mattered. "I think I understand now," Tommy said, working through the solution with Daniel's guidance. "Good job," Daniel said, ruffling Tommy's hair. "You're getting good at this. Mrs. Patterson says I might be ready for advanced studies soon. Maybe even go to the territorial capital for proper schooling when I'm older." "Would you like that?" Daniel asked. Tommy considered the question seriously. "Maybe, but only if you think it's a good idea, and only if I can come back here afterward. This is home now." "This will always be home," Daniel assured him. "No matter where life takes you, you'll always have a place here." As the evening wore on and Tommy prepared for bed, Daniel found himself thinking about the future with a hope he hadn't felt in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. His work as sheriff continued, Tommy's education progressed, and they both learned daily what it meant to be a family. But tonight, in this moment, everything was exactly as it should be. "Good night, Pa," Tommy called from his bedroom, no longer a makeshift bed on the floor, but proper room Daniel had added to the house over the winter. "Good night, son," Daniel replied. "Sweet dreams." As the house settled into quiet, Daniel stepped out onto his porch one last time, looking up at the vast Texas sky. The same stars that had watched over a terrified boy running barefoot through the night now gazed down on a family at peace. He thought about the choice he'd made that day behind the wagon, to extend his hand not with authority, but with compassion. It had been the simplest gesture, really. Just one human being reaching out to another in need. But sometimes, Daniel reflected, the simplest gestures carry the greatest power. Sometimes the most profound act of rebellion is choosing love over law, compassion over convenience, and doing what's right over doing what's easy. And sometimes, when you reach out to save someone else, you discover that they've saved you right back. The spring breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and the promise of new growth. In the distance, a coyote called to the moon, and somewhere in the darkness, an owl answered with its own lonely song. But Daniel no longer felt lonely. He was no longer just a sheriff keeping the peace in a small Texas town. He was a father, a protector, a man who had learned that the greatest law of all was written not in books, but in the human heart, the law that says every child deserves safety, every person deserves dignity, and sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply hold out your hand to someone who needs it. As Daniel Rourke headed inside to check on his sleeping son one last time before turning in himself, he carried with him the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived and a choice well made. Tomorrow would bring new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, all was well in their small corner of the world. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Would you have made the same choice Sheriff Rourke did? Share this story with someone who still believes in doing what's right, no matter the cost. Here on the channel, We tell stories like this, real or imagined, but always powerful. Stories of transformation, quiet bravery, and healing love. If that speaks to you, subscribe and turn on the bell. We'd be honored to have you with us.